8:47 a.m. Eastern Caribbean, 42 nautical miles off the coast of St. Lucia. The black hulled patrol vessels cut their engines half a mile out, drifting silent through water still warm from the previous day's sun. On the lead boat, 23 federal agents check magazines, tighten plate carriers, and confirm radio frequencies. The night air smells of diesel and salt. Above them, 2 MH-60 Blackhawks hold position beyond the radar horizon, rotors muted, waiting for the signal. Their target sits ahead in the darkness, a 340-acre private island registered under a Cayman Islands Shell Corporation, owned on paper by a Delaware LLC, owned in turn by a trust based in Liechtenstein. The beneficial owner of that trust is a woman the American public believes is asleep in her Manhattan penthouse tonight. She is not in Manhattan. She is here, and what the agents are about to find buried beneath her vacation compound will trigger the largest civil forfeiture seizure in the history of the United States Department of Justice. This is the story of how Lorna H., celebrated philanthropist, best-selling author, and the woman Forbes once called America's most trusted female executive, became the target of a joint FBI and ICE operation that uncovered a criminal enterprise so vast, so intricately woven into legitimate commerce, that federal prosecutors are still, 18 months later, untangling its full reach. You think you know how corruption works in 2026. You don't. Not until you see what they pulled out of that bunker. At 3:51 a.m., the helicopters break the horizon. Agents fast rope onto the helipad behind the main residence, a 14,000-square-foot structure of imported Italian limestone and reclaimed teak. 2 private security contractors stationed at the perimeter surrender without resistance. Their weapons, later traced through ATF records, were purchased legally in Florida by a now-defunct LLC. The breach team enters through the East Terrace. Flashbangs, shouted commands. Within 90 seconds, the residence is secured. 6 staff members are zip-tied and moved to the courtyard. Lorna H. is found in the master suite, fully dressed, seated at a writing desk, a half-finished glass of white wine beside her. She does not appear surprised. She says nothing as agents read her rights. What happens next is what changes everything. A K-9 unit working the lower-level alerts on a section of flooring beneath the wine cellar. Agents pull back a hand-woven rug imported from Isfahan. Beneath it, a steel hatch. Beneath the hatch, a stairwell. And beneath the stairwell, 84 feet below the surface of the island, a reinforced concrete bunker measuring approximately 11,000 square feet. The lights inside are already on. What the agents document over the next 72 hours will be classified, declassified, redacted, and finally released in a 247-page indictment that reads less like a criminal complaint than an autopsy of American institutional trust. Let's catalog what they found. In the first chamber, $4.7 billion in vacuum sealed United States currency, stacked in industrial pallets, organized by denomination, wrapped in plastic stamped with serial codes that would later be traced to 17 separate shell companies operating across 9 countries. The cash alone weighed approximately 52 tons. In the second chamber, gold bullion. 1,840 kilograms. Swiss refinery markings. Estimated value at time of seizure, $189 million. In the third chamber, server racks. 48 of them, cooled by an independent HVAC system drawing power from a buried diesel generator with a 30,000-gallon fuel reserve. The servers contained approximately 3 petabytes of encrypted data, including financial records, communications logs, and what investigators would later describe in court filings as a comprehensive client database. That database is the reason this story matters. Because Lorna H. was not merely hoarding money. She was operating a financial laundering and political influence network that, according to the unsealed indictment, had moved an estimated $31 billion through American and offshore institutions over a period of 14 years. Her clients included narcotics traffickers from 3 continents, sanctioned oligarchs, 2 sitting members of foreign parliaments, a Fortune 500 CEO, and, most disturbingly, 4 individuals holding active United States federal security clearances. The bunker was not a panic room. It was a command center. Who is Lorna H? To the public, until 4:00 a.m. that morning, she was a success story crafted with surgical precision. Born in suburban Connecticut. Wharton Mba, founder of a wellness and lifestyle media empire, valued, at its peak, at $2.1 billion. Author of 3 New York Times bestsellers, including The Quiet Power, a book about ethical leadership that sold 1.4 million copies. She sat on the boards of 2 major children's hospitals. She had endowed a scholarship fund at her alma mater. She had been photographed, in the year prior to her arrest, with 3 sitting United States senators, the Secretary General of a major international organization, and a former president. She gave a TED Talk in 2023 titled The Currency of Integrity. It has, as of this filming, been removed from the platform. The contrast is the point. The contrast is always the point, because what investigators would discover, as they peeled back the layers of her life, was that every public-facing element of her persona had been engineered as cover for what she actually did. The wellness company laundered cash through inflated invoices for consulting services. The book royalties were padded through bulk purchases routed by shell entities. The philanthropic donations created tax shelters and access to political figures whose votes, whose oversight, whose silence could be purchased. It was not a double life. It was a single life, with a very expensive disguise. The investigation began, as these investigations often do, with something small. In March 2024, a customs officer at the Port of Long Beach flagged a shipping container labeled as organic textile materials originating from a manufacturing partner in Vietnam. The weight distribution was inconsistent with the manifest. A secondary inspection revealed $14 million in cash hidden beneath legitimate cargo. The container was registered to a logistics subsidiary owned by Lorna H's media company. ICE Homeland Security investigations took the lead. They did not move quickly. They did not move publicly. For 7 months, they watched. They mapped. They subpoenaed bank records, tracked international wire transfers, identified couriers, and built, brick by brick, a case that they knew, the moment they began constructing it, would have to be airtight. Because Lorna H had lawyers. She had relationships. The investigators discovered as they progressed, advanced knowledge of at least 2 prior federal inquiries that had been quietly shut down before reaching her. Someone, somewhere in the system, was protecting her. That someone, it would later emerge, was several someones. The indictment names 43 co-defendants. Among them, a former Deputy Assistant Secretary at the Treasury Department, who allegedly received $11.2 million in payments routed through a real estate transaction in Aspen, Colorado, a senior compliance officer at a major American bank, accused of suppressing 17 separate suspicious activity reports that should have triggered automatic federal review, 2 attorneys at a white shoe Manhattan law firm, charged with structuring transactions specifically designed to evade reporting requirements, a former federal prosecutor, a sitting state attorney general's chief of staff. These were not desperate people. These were not people coerced. These were professionals at the peak of their careers who, according to the evidence presented at the bail hearings, made deliberate choices over periods spanning years to participate in what prosecutors describe as a sustained criminal conspiracy that exploited systemic vulnerabilities in American financial regulation, immigration enforcement, and political access. The dollar figures are staggering. The personal sums received by individual co-defendants range from $340,000 to $47 million. The aggregate corruption, prosecutors estimate, cost American taxpayers approximately $8 billion in evaded taxes and fraudulent federal benefit claims, separate from the $31 billion laundered through the network itself. Have you done that math yet? Take a moment. This was not a fringe operation. This was an institution. This is where ICE enters the story not as a supporting agency, but as a co-lead. Buried in the bunker servers, investigators uncovered what they have described in court filings as Module 7, a database tracking the movement of approximately 2,400 individuals across United States borders over an 8-year period. These were not tourists. These were not asylum seekers. These were, according to the indictment, individuals smuggled into the country specifically to provide labor at properties, businesses, and personal residences operated by Lorna H and her network of clients. The conditions documented in subsequent rescue operations are difficult to describe. Workers held without identification documents, wages garnished into perpetuity to pay off transportation debts, housing provided in converted industrial spaces with shared bathrooms and locked exterior doors. Children, in at least 4 documented cases, separated from parents and placed in households as domestic staff. When ICE agents conducted simultaneous raids at 12 of the network's primary properties on the same morning as the island operation, they recovered 312 individuals being held in conditions that prosecutors characterized as modern slavery. Medical evaluations followed. Trauma counselors were brought in. Federal immigration relief was extended to victims under the T-visa program. 3 of the rescued individuals had been missing, according to international databases, for over a decade. By the time the sun rose over the Caribbean on the morning of the raid, coordinated operations had been executed in 19 American cities, 4 foreign countries, and across 22 financial institutions. In New York, federal agents entered the offices of a midtown investment firm at 6:00 a.m. Eastern, securing computer systems and arresting 3 executives. In Miami, a former federal prosecutor is taken into custody at his home in Coral Gables. Cameras catch him in a bathrobe. In Geneva, Swiss authorities, acting on a coordinated mutual legal assistance treaty request, freeze accounts holding an estimated $890 million. In Singapore, 2 attorneys associated with the laundering network are detained at Changi Airport attempting to board a flight to Dubai. In Washington, a senior congressional staffer resigns within hours of the news breaking. Charges follow within the week. The Department of Justice press conference, held at 2 p.m. Eastern that same day, was led by the Attorney General, flanked by the Director of the FBI and the Acting Director of ICE. The Attorney General's prepared remarks, delivered in the measured cadence of someone who has rehearsed the gravity of the moment, included this sentence. Today, the United States demonstrates that no amount of wealth, no degree of influence, and no level of public reputation will shield those who exploit our institutions for personal enrichment from the consequences of federal law. The room was silent. He continued for 11 more minutes. Lorna H. is currently held without bail at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, awaiting trial on a 78-count indictment that includes charges of money laundering, racketeering, human trafficking, tax evasion, wire fraud, conspiracy to defraud the United States, and bribery of public officials. If convicted on all counts, she faces a maximum sentence of approximately 340 years in federal prison. Her legal team has filed motions to suppress evidence obtained from the bunker on grounds related to the international jurisdiction of the search. Those motions, as of this filming, have been denied at the district court level. An appeal is pending. The forfeited assets, including the $4.7 billion in seized currency, are being processed through the Department of Justice's Asset Forfeiture Program. Approximately $1.2 billion has already been earmarked for victim restitution. The remainder will be allocated according to federal statutes governing the proceeds of criminal enterprise. The island itself has been seized and is being maintained at considerable expense by the United States Marshals Service pending final disposition. You want a clean ending. There isn't one. Because the question that lingers 18 months after that pre-dawn raid in the Caribbean is not whether Lorna H. will be convicted. The evidence is, by all credible accounts, overwhelming. She will likely die in prison. The question is how she operated for 14 years. How she moved $31 billion through institutions specifically designed to detect and prevent exactly that kind of movement. How she compromised dozens of professionals across multiple sectors of American public and private life. How she earned, through manufactured reputation, the trust of millions of readers, viewers, donors, and constituents who never imagined that the woman lecturing them about. Integrity was operating one of the largest criminal enterprises in modern American history. The systemic vulnerabilities exposed by this case are now the subject of 3 congressional inquiries, 2 interagency federal task forces, and an ongoing review by the Government Accountability Office. The reforms proposed include enhanced beneficial ownership reporting, expanded authority for FinCEN, and new criminal penalties for compliance failures at major financial institutions. Whether those reforms will pass remains, as always, a political question. What is certain is this: the network that Lorna H built did not exist in isolation. It existed because the systems that should have stopped it failed. It existed because powerful people chose, repeatedly, over years, to look away. It existed because the same culture that elevated her to the cover of magazines also insulated her from the scrutiny that might have stopped her decades earlier. There are, federal investigators acknowledge, in unguarded moments, others like her. Smaller, perhaps, less ambitious, but operating on the same principles, exploiting the same gaps, hiding behind the same kinds of carefully manufactured reputations. The work continues. If this case tells us anything, it is this: the most dangerous criminals in modern America do not wear masks. They wear titles. They give speeches. They write books about ethics. They sit on boards. They smile from magazine covers. And until the institutions designed to detect them are funded, empowered, and protected from the very influence those criminals seek to purchase, there will be more bunkers. There will be more islands. There will be more pre-dawn raids and more press conferences and more shocking dollar figures. Watch the people who tell you they are most trustworthy. Watch them carefully. Because the next Lorna H is already at work. She just hasn't been caught yet.